Okay. Now in this this faux leather one that I'm making, I am going to use headliner foam. Now I wouldn't advise you using the very thick Styleville or Bianis or Bosal or any of those things because they are thick. They're 5mm thick. If you want to use foam, then this is the ideal thing to use. Now I'm in the UK and there's a UK supplier for this who used to sell headliner, sometimes called scrim foam, that was 3mm thick, and a lot of bag makers used to use it, but over the last couple of years the quality of that scrim foam has decreased, so has the thickness. And whilst I don't use it for bigger bags because it doesn't have the structure that Styleville has, this is great for small pouches, and for this particular project it's ideal. It's probably 1.5mm thick, so it's not nearly as thick as the Styleville. Let me see if I can find a bit of Styleville so you can compare it. Here we go. A scrap. Oops. I think you can probably see there's a huge difference in the thickness. Styleville is 5mm thick. This is Styleville on the top, and this below is the headliner. So there's a huge difference. If you use Styleville for this, you'll find it's really bulky. You will need to have an industrial machine. I have tried it with Styleville, and even though I think I can sew most things with my Juki, it was not happy sewing the Styleville using this. Now you've got the option, you can either use foam in the front and foam in the back, or foam just in the back, or foam just in the front. It's really very much up to you. So I've cut this, and headliner has two sides, so it has generally has a nylon side and a sort of felted side. There are some headliners that just have like an open foam side as well, so I don't use that. I've only ever used the stuff that's got the mesh on one side and the felt on the other. And I like to use the felt side against the back of my fabric because it gives it a bit of grip. It grips onto it a bit like excuse me, fuzzy felt when you were a kid. Who remembers that? Great stuff. Used to be able to make picture scenes and farmyards and all sorts with it. Now I'm not going to worry too much that this is a little bit too big. The foam is a little bit too big. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sew baste this into place. So I'm just going to sew baste within the seam allowance using the longest stitch I have on my machine. I'm not going to sew baste the curves because I don't like sew and basting curves. I think it pulls them out of shape. I'm just going to sew baste the long sides. I'm not back stitching because we're going to remove these stitches after we've constructed our bag. So I'm just literally stitching across the top, across the bottom, and up both sides. Now there's a reason why I don't do the curves, and that's because I find that when I sew around the curves to baste it, it will often stretch it slightly out of shape, and that's really annoying. So just doing the along the sides and leaving the curves out works better for me. Now once you've basted it, you can go along and trim any extra bits of foam that you've got away from the edges, and sometimes just even if you've cut it perfectly, just the act of stitching it will squash the foam enough that a small amount of it will poke out of the sides of your work. So just trim it off. It's only a fraction, just a little bit. So that's the foam added to the back. Now if you're using fusible fleece, you will have added it to your lining panel, so you don't need foam. I wouldn't advise using both foam and fleece, one or the other. You know, pick and choose according to A, your skill level, B, the thickness of your faux leather, and C, your machine capabilities. And I'm assuming that nobody here is actually making this for the first time, or sewing a bag for the first time, so you will already know what your machine can do. So that's the foam basted onto the back of my bag, and the same will apply if you're making the bag in fabric. And I'm just going to retrieve the front of my bag, and as we remember, our linings were slightly too big, and that's fine, that's how it should be. Turn it right sides down, lift the lining away, and position your piece of foam so that it matches up along the bottom edge. It shouldn't impinge on your pocket. It should sit just below your pocket. You can bring your lining fabric back over the top. And what I like to do is just press the lining fabric so that it kind of sits nice and flat over the top of that foam. And then I'm going to turn it over, and I'm going to sew baste all the way around the outside of this one. But I'm not going to do all around the outside, I'm just going to do the long and the short side. So same thing again. One. Basically, I'm just basting that foam into place. It's also going to hold my lining in place at this point. I'm going to come along the top. And now you can trim off any excess lining fabric or little bits of foam that may have squashed out as you've done your basting stitches. And the reason that we left our lining slightly bigger was, well, there were two really, but one was because of the variations in the scant 1/4 of an inch when you did your zipper, and the other is because when you add foam, this bottom piece of lining gets pulled slightly up, so it makes a slight bump here, which means that your lining wouldn't have been long enough if you'd have cut it to the exact size. So always worth just having it slightly bigger to allow for adding foam and the variations of thickness of foam, because everybody's going to have different sorts of foam if they're using it. And there we have it. So that's the front of our bag with foam. Oh, I've got some foam on the side there that needs to be trimmed away. And the back of our bag. Now what we're going to do is take our lining panel that we made, and we're going to place it right sides up. So this is my back panel, and I've got the back panel right sides down, so the foam is facing upwards, and I'm going to pop my lining panel right sides up on top, matching up the sides and the top and bottom. I'm going to clip it in place. I want it to be held fairly tightly, so smooch it out so that it's there's a word. Pull it out so that it's sitting nice and snugly onto, got a thread there, nice and snugly on top of your base panel. Now, if you feel really confident, you could actually add this at the same time as you add your foam. I personally find it goes a bit haywire when I do that, so I like to try and do it separately. It's very much a personal preference. I'm going to turn over because I'm going to stitch from this side. It's a lot easier, and I'm just going to baste along the top and the bottom, just to secure my lining in place. That does mean you've got 2 lines of basting, but I find this works better for me. If if you're doing this in fabric, I would always suggest using foam. I think it's a little bit gutless if you do it in with fusible fleece, but again, it's a personal preference. So I'm only just doing the top and the bottom, and that looks fine. I'm happy with that. I'm just going to pop that bit out of the way. I'm going to grab my beautiful front and my little strap connector that I made. Now, positioning of the strap connector is, again, it's up to you really. I like to put mine just a little bit lower than the zipper overlay. So you can see it's approximately ½ an inch lower. If you wanted to do it centrally, so that the bag hangs centrally, or even a little bit higher, I wouldn't, however, do it on the curve. It is very much up to you. And I'm positioning that there. I'm happy with that. And I'm just going to pop a couple of stitches to hold that in place. So that's there now, no problem at all. So I'll come back to you shortly with how we construct the rest of this bag, and then we'll go on to making our wrist strap. Now, exactly the same process applies with faux leather as does with fabric. So you're just going to do exactly the same regardless if you're doing faux leather or fabric. And I think that's as much as I can show you in this video. And also we'll come back with actually constructing the bag and making our wrist strap.